Yo, what's up, y'all? This is Chief Steve with another episode of True Story, coming at y'all with another passage from the calendar of state papers preserved in the State Paper Department of Her Majesty's Record Office. Again, this is on archive.org, free information, fair use. This is by Great Britain. It's Public Record Office, as you can see. Publication date 1574. All right, we're going to be going page 17. And this is just showing y'all that they knew that we were fighting and we weren't taking any mess. And this is why. This is basically a representative in the colonies during this time. As you can see on those dates there, 1711, 1712. This is during colonial time. So we had this country wasn't yet a country, and the colonies at this time were still reporting to the British Crown. So we've been giving them problems over on the east side, and they're feeling it. So, and it was by their own accounts as well, as you'll find out. But this is just their report. One of their annual reports or monthly reports that they give to the British Crown at the time, to basically let them know what's going on in the colonies. And basically this is a call for help, because we were getting on them boys. All right, so here we go. I'm gonna read it. Page 17. We're gonna start right here, actually. Well, no. Oh no, hold on, let me go back. Bear with me, y'all. All right, we're gonna start over here on the I have. All right, follow with me. Read on, pause if you need to. We about to get into it. I'm gonna do my best to just read all the way through it and not, turn this into a damn sermon. But yeah, it gets real passionate, it gets real deep. But all right, let's get into it, y'all. Without further ado. I have also sent the duplicates of the laws and journals of assembly, together with the several proclamations issued this year. It is with very great concern that I find myself still obliged to represent to your lords the unhappy situation of affairs in the neighboring province of North Carolina. For since the hasty peace concluded with the Indians, May 8th, the forces sent from South Carolina are returned home, and the Indians have committed 2 fresh massacres, and it is not likely they will stop there. If there be truth in what one of their chiefs concerned in the first massacre hath lately confessed at his execution, that the Senecas have promised them a powerful assistance by the latter end of next month. So it was 2 massacres that went down, and they ended up executing the chiefs. But they said, well, Chief, what's your last words? And he said, well, we got homies coming to help us out, and expect them to be hitting y'all door by the end of next month. And then they offed him. But it is what it is. They warned him. It says, who are in their way to fall on some. So basically the Senecas, they're coming at the end of next month, and it says, who are in their way to fall on some of the tributary Indians on our frontiers. Tributary just basically means that, these were the ones that were, they considered, the favored Indians. They're the ones that, aren't hostile, and as a matter of fact, can turn them hostile against other Indians, because they want to live on their frontier. They want to live in peace and stuff. So, they basically say, hey, we could trade, we can be cool with each other and everything, and we'll help y'all out. Just don't fuck with our people, basically. So that's what they were. That was their notion as being tributary Indians. I wouldn't call them sellouts per se. They were just trying to protect their people and keep the peace. So the tributary Indians on our frontiers. And what seems to confirm this is the account I have just now seen in a letter from the Secretary of New York to the Governor of North Carolina that the French have been very active to persuade the Senecas to join the Tuscaroras. So really, this was a fight against the British and the French, but we was in the middle of it. And, one side was working for the other was working for, you know how that goes. And so it says, and it is to be feared have prevailed with them. So the Senecas and the Tuscaroras are starting to click up. They want to say thanks to the French. But you're about to see why they did what they did in the first place and why these massacres happened. It says the conduct of the government of North Carolina from the beginning of this Indian War has been so unaccountably irregular that it has rendered all the measures I was willing to enter into for their assistance ineffectual. And I hope, when I have mentioned a few instances thereof, your lords will not judge me only an idle spectator of the miseries of my fellow subjects. The first, when I had engaged our assembly to vote a considerable supply for the succor of that province, their assembly, which was then sitting, instead of acting in concert with ours, fell into such heat among themselves. So they was fighting amongst themselves, y'all, because they could not oblige the governors to admit into their former offices the most notorious fomenters of the late rebellion, that they would take no measures against the common enemy. Now, see, they didn't want to fight us because they already knew what was coming with it. I mean, these, they already knew what was up. And they were saying, nah, we don't want to fight with y'all. We don't want to fight with y'all against them. Hell no. And then they started fighting amongst themselves. And it says, and to this behavior of theirs may in a great measure be attributed by our burgesses who fell from their first resolutions and could not thereafter be prevailed upon to give assistance to a people so wanting to themselves. So then they started calling the other side selfish because they didn't want to help them fight against the Indians. So it was a big division. Next, when I had by a solemn treaty made in the presence of our assembly, engaged the upper towns of the Tuscaroras to join in cutting off those concerned in the massacre. Real quick. They weren't living in villages. These Indians had towns, okay? We were an advanced people. We were an advanced civilization, okay? We had our own towns. We had our own towns already established here as Aboriginal people, copper-colored people of this land. We were living good. They came over here and started messing with our stuff. Started taking our towns. Started making towns next to our towns. Building forts and stuff next to our towns, calling them settlements. Okay? But we were very advanced. We already had our own towns. So the Tuscaroras, they engaged the upper towns of the Tuscaroras to join in cutting off those concerned in the massacre. They wanted them to cut their own people off and had communicated the same to the governor of North Carolina. That government, instead of concurring with me in stipulations that provided solely for their succor and the relief of their captives, rather chose to denounce war against all the towns in general, and without waiting to see whether those upper towns would perform any of their engagements, they immediately fell upon those very people who, how little sober they designed to execute their promises, hereupon argued that we had violated ours. So, I mean, can you really blame them though? You came upon their land. You came upon their land and established all of these civilizations, established all of these colonies and stuff. And now you want us to help take out our own people? Can I get a FU for a 500, please? I don't care what the relationships was. We didn't turn on our people like that, especially our own tribes. That was a no-no. But see, that was that colonial way of thinking, but they, well, you know how we get. It's like, yeah, nah, we want peace amongst everybody, because let's not forget, you went back on y'all promises a long time ago. You know how we don't ever forget. You know what I'm saying? We'll show a little mercy, but we ain't gonna never forget. We'll keep the peace, but we ain't gonna forget what you did to us. And so they had to remind them, look, because especially once they started talking out their neck, talking sideways, getting mad at us because we wouldn't turn on our own people. Like, look, let's not forget the promises that y'all broke. Okay? He didn't even want to get into what they violated. He just goes on to say, and lastly, for I will not trouble your lords with all the instances I could give. See, you don't want to disclose everything. Says, when their whole assembly joined in an address to me last spring, begging an aid of 200 men for the better carrying on the war, and in that address told me that they had raised 4,000. I don't know the money symbol for this right now. We could just say dollars for lack of a better term. Just think, colonial time. So, but raised about $400, whereby the succors sent from hence would be, turn the page, provided for. I thereupon made extraordinary efforts to assist them with 200 white men and Indians, as your lords will observe in the journal of the council April 24th last, and accordingly directed the rendezvous of those forces on the 10th of May. Yet, upon my meeting the governor of North Carolina to adjust certain preliminaries for the better carrying on the service and the subsistence of the troops, I found that government never intended to furnish so much as provisions or be at any manner of expense for them, but on the contrary had laid 10%. So they asked for all those men. North Carolina asked for all these men to help fight against, to fight in the Indian War, and they after they got all those men, they didn't want to pay nobody. They didn't even want to give them no food. They just say, we'll throw this little 10% as a government. We'll throw this little 10% at y'all, y'all take care of the rest. That's our contribution to the war. But thanks for the 200 men, though. See, they was screwing themselves over and getting mad at and we was in the middle of it, and we were against them as well. While they is trying to establish all these different governments and stuff, they were fighting amongst themselves, literally disorganized chaos, and at the same time trying to kill us off. But look, we're going to realize why these massacres happened. So they laid their 10% down, right, on all the provisions carried into that country, so that the forces sent to their assistance must not only be paid and subsisted at the charge of this government, but must also pay a duty for the victuals they eat while they were employed in the defense of that country. Now, see, yeah, that just goes to show that our people were never slaves. Our people were workers. Our Indians, our ancestors were working with these guys. They were fighting for them. They were working in their towns. They were representatives towards other Indians' relations. It sounds a lot familiar as what's going on today. I mean, you can still kind of consider it slavery, because we were working for, as you can see, we had Indians fighting for them and stuff, and they didn't even want to feed us. And that the fact that it was not only white men but Indians as well, that just gave them more ammunition not to provide the provisions and stuff that they needed to feed those troops, because they, you already know the tension. So they had their biases or whatever. So yeah. Besides that, let's see. Let's just go back up here. On all the provisions carried into that country, so the forces sent to their assistance must not only be paid and subsisted at the charge of this government, but must also pay a duty for the victuals they eat while they were employed in the defense of that country. And besides this, I found the commander of their forces had of his own head clapped up a peace with the Indians upon very odd and unaccountable conditions. Okay, so the commander of these forces in North Carolina took it upon himself, didn't tell their government or anything. It just said, well, just basically came up with a peace thing, and so it's an unofficial peace treaty that they had. Okay, and this is a military commander. Keep in mind. So he clapped up a peace with the Indians upon very odd and unaccountable conditions, which nobody expected to last long, and it seems he did not intend it should. Okay, he had plans, for he soon after surprised some towns and carried off a great many captives of those who looked upon themselves as secure under the treaty he had made with them. So this mother was coming over there and taking our people. He was taking Indians, promising them a false peace, and then kidnapping them and taking them back to, as you see, and by that means he has entailed a new war on the people of North Carolina. He was taking them out of their land. He was kidnapping, in which he was resolved to have, hold on, I'm sorry, man. For he soon after surprised some towns and carried off a great many captives of those who looked upon themselves as secure under the treaty he had made with them, and by that means he has entailed a new war on the people of North Carolina, in which he was resolved to have no share in. So he gonna go over there and capture people, but then say he don't have nothing to do with this new war, having immediately after set sail with his prisoners to South Carolina, and the 2 massacres I have above mentioned have been the immediate consequence of this Mr. Barnwell's treachery. So this was a commander named Mr. Barnwell, made a false treaty amongst these people, amongst the Tuscaroras, kidnapped them, took them literally took them down south. And yeah, that's when it hit the fan. Because you're not going to just take our people. And see, I just wanted to stop right there and pause for a minute. You're not just going to take our people and not expect any payback in return. Our people didn't work like that. So when you talk about, oh, our because we know who we talking about at this point. The Indians are the indigenous aboriginal copper-colored people of this land that we know today as so-called black people. You not going to walk up in our house, promise us a fake peace, oh, everything's cool, hunky-dory, and then once we not looking, take our people and move them down south as prisoners, trying to make slaves out of them without us having no kind of pushback in return. Okay? There was no transatlantic slave trade, as I mentioned in that last video that I did. There was no the economy was so low, it was so bad, they could not afford to bring outsiders. They couldn't afford a passage out to Africa. It said it right there in the passage in the colonial papers that they could not afford to bring people from Africa. The price of tobacco and their economy was so low, the prices were so low that they couldn't afford a big expedition or whatever you want to call it like that. That's why they was constantly writing correspondence to Britain and sending it by, things like, because they couldn't personally go over there and do that themselves. They were spending more in meetings, getting together, than they actually had in the economy. And that actually sounds a lot similar to today. Hence why we're in so much debt as a country. We were in debt before we were even a country. You feel me? So, yeah, that happened. Sorry, y'all. That happened. And yeah, that's when these massacres ended up going. So don't miss me with all that. Oh, we were slaves. We were captives. We were this. Nah, when our people got captured and we went and we got them back. We started taking out folks. Men, women, children included. Everybody was getting it. Okay? So this was all Mr. Barnwell's fault going on down in Carolina. It says these irregular proceedings both discouraged and disabled me from assisting the unfortunate people of that province. So at that point, they knew they messed up because they done took his men, they done used, and they done made this false. They done basically made shit worse. It's no other way to put it. They tore up more relations and it just made it so now they don't even want to help them at all. And it says, disabled from assisting the unfortunate people of that province who must be forced to abandon all their settlements on Neuse and Pamplico River and thereby encourage the heathen to further attempts both on the other parts of that country and on our frontiers. And I must sit down under the mortification of seeing myself unable to protect His Majesty's subjects until a nearer approach of danger convinces the people of this colony of the greater error, of their error. So, in not making timely provisions to hinder the growing power of the heathen and alarms both countries to act more vigorously for their mutual defense. See? So, at this point, they knew they messed up. The relations went to crap. They started stealing folks. They wasn't taking them to Africa. They wasn't taking them nowhere. They was literally taking them down south. They were kidnapping our people from one state and taking them to another state. And this is during war. So we are prisoners of war. They were doing this all over at a matter, as time goes on. This is the 1700s right now. And then by the 1800s, when things started, coming to a head, at this point, you got to understand, they were doing this stuff without the government's help, without the colonies' help. They were doing this as militias. They were taking in prisoners of war. This was wartime. All was fair in war at that point, and they were taking prisoners of war. Government was mad, but they really didn't do anything all they did was just basically say, oh man, they just made things worse. So basically, we need more money. We need more defense. We need more of this. We need more of that. But they weren't doing anything to rectify what was happening. They didn't do anything to further extend peace. They didn't do anything to further try to, and then the false peace that they did set up, they started taking more things. It went from taking people to taking land, to taking people to taking land. And then eventually, that's how this government became the United States corporation that it is today. But I wanted to just bring to y'all attention, family, that we were not just letting these people do anything and everything they wanted to do to us. Okay? We were a rich people. We were a proud people. We were an advanced people. We had our own towns. We had our own government. They were coming over there and they was messing with our stuff. Okay? But this is the truth, the verifiable truth. This is true story right here. I want to thank y'all for joining me on this. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel. Definitely more to come.